Hi everybody, this is Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts. I'm coming to you today talking about yarn storage. So today is part one of a two-parter. This is going to be about yarn storage so that you protect your yarn and keep it safe, and maybe a little on organization of the yarn itself. And the next video is actually going to be on tools and organization and that kind of thing, and also how to set up a yarn space so that you can craft and everything you need is kind of easily laid out. That'll be next time. Today is just about yarn. Alright, so before we actually get into places where you can store your yarn, I want to talk about how to keep your yarn, what form your yarn should be in to keep it safe. So, if you've got yarn that came in a ball like this or a ball like this, you are perfectly fine. These have enough squish, they're professionally manufactured so that they're not going to overstretch. This one is even a center pull ball. You can see that it's actually got its own starter already here. Basically, you can pull these out and just use them. Might as well just keep them this way. Rewinding them into a cake, unless you particularly like using a cake, makes no sense. The trick comes when you have something that looks like this. This is not conducive to actually using it. This, yes, I did dye this myself, hence why the skein looks wonky. But, you know, this is really good for storage. You can just lay it there, you can stack them, you can make a pyramid out of them. It doesn't really matter. It'll all work out fine for storage. But, you know, this can't be used like this. This has to be wound into some kind of a cake. And that's where the debate comes in, whether you should wind this into a cake and store it as a cake, or if you should just leave it like this until you need it and then wind it into a cake. So a quick note, in order to wind into a cake, you need a Swift and a ball winder. You need both. You can do it with just a ball winder and use like the back of a chair, but you're still going to get tangles. It doesn't always work as well. Having the proper tools in this case really does help. You can also take it to your local yarn shop. They'll probably just wind it for you when you need it. The trick comes though with how tightly you wind your balls. So a properly wound ball should look like this. It's a good size. You've got your little center pull up here that you can't really see because of lack of contrast, and that you can pull from, and then it's got squish. You can really, you know, if you look at this, look at all that squish. This is actually more squishy than this professionally made one. Like, this is, I love this yarn. I know, Hobby Lobby, questionable ethics, but cheap and soft, and for Christmas presents. But this isn't even as squishy as that. This has a firmness in the center just because, you know, it's a professionally wound thing. Mine's squishier. You want it squishy. That squishiness means that it's not tight. If it's got somewhere to go, that it can still go, it's not stretched. That's actually what happens with this hank. Eventually they kind of untwist to be in a comfortable, relaxed position, and you can feel the squish. If there's some place for the yarn to go, it's not stretched. So the concern comes when you get it too tight. That was a nice loose ball of yarn. If it's too tight, you'll know because, well, I don't have a tightly wound ball of yarn, but I do have an equivalent size comparison. This is the normal one that I already showed you, and this is the size that it would be if it's wound too tightly. Now this would be the same amount of yarn as this, it's just pulled very tight, or it could even be a little bit smaller. And if you squish it, it will have absolutely no give. It will feel like a softball or a baseball. You do not want that. if there's no place for it to go, it's stretched, it's pulled. I have been given yarn that is in a ball already and you feel it, and it's like, nope, if I chuck this at my husband's head, it would knock him out. If you've got that feeling over the ball, don't use that yarn. It's stretched. Stretched yarn, in my sock yarn video, I talked about how you want your yarn to be springy, and there's kind of a memory to wool in particular that you want it to have, where if you stretch it and pull it out completely, it'll kind of spring back into its relaxed position. That's what you want yarn to do, and if it's stretched for too long, that springiness, that memory won't be there. So the determining factor is how loose or tight your ball is. Now, you don't want your ball too loose because then it'll just tangle, and that means that why the heck did you cake it up in the first place, right? But you want that beautiful balance of firmness where it's holding together and you still got squish. This is okay to leave it for as long as you want. This is safe. If it's hard as a rock, it's not safe. Don't do that. You need to use that like the same day you cake it up. If you can, no more than 3 days later. That actually happened to me when I was in Arizona in February. I was on vacation and I went to an awesome yarn shop, and I decided I wanted some of the yarn caked up because I was definitely going to be using it. And it's a good thing I did use it within 3 days, because it could have totally lost its springiness with how hard and small those balls were. So I've got my setup here. This is a Swift. This is an umbrella Swift, and it's a cheap piece of crap that I got off of Amazon. Stanwood Swifts or Amish Swifts are very popular, though quite pricey. But the way I understand it, that's the last Swift you'll ever need. There's a chance that this whole entire thing may sink while I show you what I'm going to show you. That's because it's, kind of broken. This is a yarn winder. I couldn't get everything in the shot, so there's actually a crank on this side over here that's beyond. And basically, it's got this little thingy dingy here that it's got some toodle-doodles, and you get your yarn through it, wrap it, and it'll wrap itself as you need it. So there are many different ways to wind a hank into a ball. You do need to do this before you start knitting, otherwise you're going to have a huge tangled mess. This is a skein of yarn that I dyed myself. So it's got a few issues in it, being that it might be a little bit tangled. So I want to show you, one, how to tension this properly, so that way you don't wind up with a cake that's too dense or too loose. Also, if there's an issue, how to kind of patiently get through it. Well, we'll see if that second one happens. Because basically what I do is I take the yarn and I kind of hold it up. I don't put any real tension on it. I kind of close my hand, but you can easily just move the yarn through, because it does need to move through. You want it to be kind of tight here. Who cares about this over here, as long as it doesn't connect to these little do-boppers down here. I know I'm full of technical jargon today, but you want to make sure that there's some tension here and that this thing isn't just pulling and yanking, because here's what happens if you just do it regular. It pulls for a second and then it's loose, and then it pulls for a second and then it's loose. See how this is bopping up and down right here and then it's not? Some people don't like how this tensions everything over here. I find it actually makes it a little bit too loose. So instead I just run it so that it goes across my fingers. I don't even have to close my fingers in order to do this. And when I reach an issue, I stop immediately and pull up, not down. I don't know why it works better when you pull up, but for some reason just making sure you're pulling up instead of down helps. And then I keep going. Kind of that area with that darker bit of pink is where most of the tangles manage to happen. I like dyeing yarn. Chemknits tutorials on YouTube is a great way to get into dyeing. If you look into her videos before her Dye Pot Weekly episode 100, so like 1 through 100, you get a bunch of tutorials on how to dye with food coloring. And that's basically what I did. I got some Wilton's pink and I dip dyed 2 hanks of yarn because my husband's baby cousin, who's just turned 3, is getting a Flaxlight sweater for Christmas. This is going to be half of her sweater. Oh, look at that. We have another issue. I pull up. Problem solved. A little bit of patience goes a long way. And that's pretty much it. I don't know the brand of this yarn winder. I got it at my local yarn shop. Most of them are some version of this. You can get wooden ones that are instead of having the little ball going kind of on a diagonal, it'll be fully sideways. I can't wrap my head around those very well, so good luck with that, but I like the ones that have kind of an angle. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The next thing to consider is protection from bugs. So some places have more of a concern for bugs than others. Like I live in the Central Valley of California. Bugs really aren't a concern for me. I'm more likely to get roaches than moths. The moths I have are the kind that fly around and eat tomato plants. I don't have the kind that eat clothes. So I don't really have to worry about that too much. So I have a bare minimum protection set up for my fibers. There are a couple of things that you should consider before setting up whatever organizational system you're going to set up. First of all is how much are you going to actually use the yarn and how dark it is. So bugs that eat clothes want some place that is dark, and they want some place that they can settle and raise their little family. They're not looking for something that gets moved. They're not looking for something that has light. They're also attracted to smell. They can tell the difference between wool and acrylic, for example, because the acrylic doesn't smell like a barnyard, whereas wool kind of does. And they want that barnyard smell because that tells them that there's nutrition for them there. They're not going to eat acrylic or polyester because that's synthetic. It's made from oil. It's essentially plastic. It's like if you were eating Tupperware. By the way, don't eat Tupperware. Not a good idea. Just why bugs typically leave the acrylic alone. They're a little bit more likely to eat the cotton, the way I understand it, but they're most likely to go and eat the wool. So the wool's the one you really need to protect, as well as the cotton, basically any natural fiber, because they can smell it. So things that mask that smell help as well. So going back to the first one, making sure that it's not dark and that you disturb your yarn regularly. So hopefully you're going to go through your stash regularly because you're going to be searching for things to use during your projects. Making sure that if you're fiddling around in one area, it kind of jostles a nearby area will help a lot, because that means it's not a safe place for your bugs to settle. Also making sure that there's regular access to light. Now you need to be careful on the balance with this one because some yarn colors fade in light, especially if the dyer used food coloring, because food coloring isn't designed to be light safe. It's not bad if it's in a generally lit room, or if you have it in, a closet or something, but you don't want that in direct sunlight most of the time. You just want it kind of in a room like this where it's general ambient lighting. Another thing is smell. You can do smell in several ways. There's a reason why cedar is considered to be bug repellent, even though the scent of cedar itself technically isn't. The thing is, cedar is a very strong smell that covers up the smell of the wool, and it repels bugs because of the strength of the smell. So having cedar chips amongst your clothes is good. Another option is having essential oils. So you can drizzle some essential oils like peppermint or lavender or eucalyptus near where your yarn is, or have like a bottle of it that's just open in a place where you know it's not going to fall over and stain your yarn. You don't want the essential oil to touch your yarn. That's not good for the yarn. But have that open so that it stinks up the area, so to speak. Will keep bugs away for the exact same reason. Now you need to be careful with cedar and essential oils because some of them are toxic to certain animals. I know, for instance, that eucalyptus, peppermint, and lavender that I recommended earlier are toxic to cats. So if you're going to go that route, talk to your vet first. They'll know what's up and can give you some solid recommendations. Another option, of course, is mothballs, but those are pretty toxic as well. And they stink, I'm told. I've never had to use one. But here's my super secret advice that I got off the internet. Bar soap. I like Dove. Dove is my favorite. I actually just like to use Dove. It's got a gentle moisturizer that's really good for skin. It's one of the few I don't mind using on my face, my hands, or the rest of my body, and it makes my skin still feel nice. I mean, admittedly, I don't have eczema or shingles or anything that'll, medical going on. But this stuff's pretty nice. It also smells pretty strongly, but not in a bad way. I like the pink one in particular because that smells like rose, and that's kind of one of my favorite scents. And this one's more of a white linen. And these are really easy to use because you do one of two things. One, just open the box and set it in with your yarn. Another option is to fully take it out and put it into a Soap Saver scrubby bag, because then you get more of the scent permeating around because it'll have full access 360 degrees around the bar. So those are good options. And the cool thing is these are not toxic for animals because we have them in our bathrooms, in open soap dishes, and in the shower, and animals can go up if they want and sniff them and rub their faces on them, and nothing happens. They're safe for animals. So my recommendation. Another thing to think about, especially if you really have a big bug problem, is put your yarn in plastic. It doesn't matter if it's a plastic bin or plastic bags, as long as you can seal them tightly. That way no bugs have a chance to get in. So if you're a person like me and you don't have much of a problem with bugs, just making sure that you're going through your stash regularly, making sure that it has periodic access to light, and making sure that there's something kind of strongly scented to ward off any bugs that are being adventurous, you're probably going to be fine. Last tip, if you need it, is bugs will not survive freezing temperatures. So throwing whatever your plastic wrapped yarn is into the freezer with your yarn in it, or if you're in a place that snows, into the snow for 24 to 48 hours, is probably going to kill everything in it. If you really feel strongly about it, about 2 weeks later, throw it in for another 2 days or so, again, to kill off any eggs that may have hatched. And doing that about once a year, in addition to everything else, will be fine. Now, the caveat with the plastic, some people believe, and I don't know the truth of this, Some people believe that yarn needs to be able to breathe. But again, if you're going through and opening things up periodically to see what's in your bags and to pull things out and check content to see if it'll fit for a project you've got, that pretty much sorts itself out anyway. And maybe once a month going through, opening the bags, and then going through and closing them all again, you'll be fine. So the next step is that I'm going to show you my yarn stash and how I have it organized. And I'm going to talk about that with you in just a moment. Hi again. So sorry for this being awkward, but I'm doing this completely on my own today. So yeah, let's see. So this is this yarn stash. You'll remember some of my very first videos where I'd be sitting like right here or right there, and you can see my yarn stash pretty easily. I've updated it a lot. I reorganized recently, so there is an organizational system to this. Let's see. So this stuff right here is my cotton crochet thread. As you can see, I have a metric boatload of it, and I'm going to be working my way through this on small projects, trying to get rid of it. I don't need this much. I want a black, I want a white, and that's pretty much all I need. Red doilies are great in concept, but don't really work out very well. These are kind of organized. So a big question that comes up a lot is, should you organize based on brand or by color? I don't do either of those. I organize entirely based on fiber content and size. So fiber content first. Everything in these bags, with a few exceptions, is wool or a wool blend. There are size 4. This one's sort of miscellaneous. These are sock yarns specifically. These are all stroll, just because it's all kind of the same size and the same material. I've got mohair in this bag. This is kind of miscellaneous, but it's got some Malabrigo and a couple of sock weight yarns. Anyway, the only cotton I have on this entire section is actually in this bag right here, and it's a super soft cotton that I've only got one hank of. If you look down, there's more. So this thing up here is actually a hanging shoe cubby that I got for under $9 from Walmart, I believe. And down there, that is a crate. Let's see, I can make this a little bit better. There, see that crate? I can actually pull that crate out, and it's got my Swift, it's got my ball winder, it's got a bag that has a whole bunch of partially used skeins of sock yarn, so that the next time I make a scrappy shawl, I'll just have them all right there and ready. I've got a bag that's closed that has a bunch of yarn. It's got enough yarn to make a sweater that I got from Knit Picks. I've also got another bag in there that's kind of closed. It's folded in on itself and tied, I believe. And that's got some yarn I dyed for another sweater, that neither of which I'm going to cast on for the time being, because 110 degree weather is a terrible time to be knitting a sweater. I'm going to be knitting one soon. That pink yarn I showed you earlier is going to be for my husband's 3-year-old cousin for Christmas. But you know, hers is not going to be that big, so I don't mind doing that during the summer. And I know you can see that bag right there. That's actually game stuff. So I play Pathfinder Society with my husband and a group of friends, and so that's all of our game stuff. No, we don't hide our computer in the closet. But the thing I do hide in the closet that you may not have noticed are my knitting looms. I've got them right here, hanging from a hanger. These don't need to be sealed. This bag never closed since I got it. I got it used from Facebook of all places. So as you can see, a large portion of my yarn is here, right here where I can see it, including the acrylic. I think that's the one thing I missed explaining to you. These two little shelves are acrylic. This is Vanna's Choice because it's all the same size, except for this is some leftover stuff. And then I've got my worsted weight size stuff down there. And because I have that, you know, you'll notice that the acrylic is not protected because it doesn't need to be. Bugs aren't interested. Everything else is in plastic for simplicity. And as you can see, it's actually really easy to see everything that's in there. And if you're feeling really organizational, you can actually write what's on here, especially if you tend to buy and rebuy. And here's the thing, I know some people are like, oh, plastic bags aren't eco-friendly. The thing is, this is actually relatively eco-friendly because I'm not throwing these away. There's nothing in here that's dirty or particularly germy. So, you know, say I use my little Malabrigo yarns, which are these two, aren't they pretty? You know, I use these and then I get some more yarn. I'm going to put them in here if they kind of go with these yarns in my head. So by doing that, I'm reusing these. They're not going to be waste. It's going to be a really long time before they rip. And even if they do rip, I have tape and I have duct tape. I can put them back together. And the cool thing is, you know, for all, you know, you can open it up and then fold it over, get all the air out. Which actually saves a lot of space as well. And then they go back. And you know that soap that I showed you earlier that I've got that's open? Right there. I've got another one down there. And I'm pretty sure there's another one that's kind of hidden, but that's kind of hidden in this section. Welcome to my bedroom. Please ignore any mess that you can see, though it doesn't look that bad. I'm having a lazy day and didn't make the bed. Anyway, this is the last section of where I stash my yarn. Here's tub number 1. You can't really see it there. Let's see. Now, mine don't lock solidly, but ta-da! This is all of my cotton yarn. This is everything thicker than thread. It's mostly Knit Picks Dishy. I love that stuff. It's got a tighter twist to it. It honestly feels more like a 3-weight, and you can use a smaller hook or a smaller needle, but I don't usually drop that size because I find having those little air holes that you put in with a normal size, you know, 5mm or whatever hook or needles helps the finished product when you make washcloths drain. But you'll notice something somewhere. Aha! This is one of those soap saver scrubby things I told you about. It's a little bag and it's got the soap in it. And I just put it in there. And the cool thing is, sometimes as you know, the soap is available to the open air, it just kind of gets old and the smell kind of dissipates. But all you have to do is kind of scrub this a little bit. Periodically, you get down to the next layer that's still fresh of scent. You can drop it back in. If the soap has basically outlived its usefulness here, or you just run out of it in the bathroom, you can just grab it here. It's already in the soap saver thingy dingy, and you just start using it in your shower, or you can dump it out and put it in your soap dish and then put the new bar in there, or just leave it in its box again. It really doesn't matter. You just want something to keep it so that you're not putting pure soap directly on your yarn. It creates a funky texture, though it'll wash off. And mine, these don't need to, you know, I'm in a relatively safe area. I don't really need to have mine, that's my foot. I don't need mine to seal perfectly, so mine are a touch too full. I'm not too worried about it. But this one's the rest of my wool products. As you can see, I mostly keep them in hanks. I have another soapy, and this one I actually have some that this is what it looks like if you do a yarn ball too loose. You create a mess. It's perfectly fine. It's healthy. It's a little squished in there. It's not holding its shape to save its life. But yeah, this is my yarn storage. I do have some bare yarn that is actually still in the box in which it came. I'm not bothering to show you that because we all know what boxes look like. And the cool thing with Knit Picks is they always send it in a box, but it's also in a bag inside the box, so in case your box gets wet, you're fine. And look at that, it hides nicely and neatly. You'll never know that under this bed, all I've got are yarn and DDR mats that my husband owns. The yarn honestly gets used more than the DDR mats. So that's my stash. I don't have a particularly large one. I really can't afford a large one. And yes, now these days I do have a lot more expensive yarn. So the purchases that I've been making have been more conscientious. I do have a box right now that is also full of yarn, but that's specifically for Christmas presents. So that's not in with the regular stash, because if it were in with the regular stash, I wouldn't have it for Christmas presents anymore because I'd probably wind up using it. So that's not exactly an organizational thing, that's an allocation of resources thing. And I'll go probably a bit more into that in the next video. Now, one last thing I want to discuss, I know this video is kind of probably dragging along, but I wanted to talk about why we have yarn stashes. It's amazing how psychological it is, because there's typically two camps, and some people drift from camp to camp, but there's the people who only buy yarn for a project, and that's it. They don't keep big stashes. They basically buy what they need for a specific project, and that's it. And then there's those of us who have a stash. We typically shop the yarn and the project kind of follows. They're two different philosophies. And honestly, the way I do it, that second group, where it comes from a different emotional place from the first group. And there's an upside and a downside to both. Those of us who keep stashes, we tend to get excited about yarn. The yarn is like its own hobby, and we tend to buy whether or not we have a project in mind. That's why the rules that I instigated last year, which include only buying yarn when I need it for a specific project or when it's on clearance sale, preferably both, is so important to me because I don't have that much space. That is literally all the space I have is what I've shown you for stashing my yarn. Also, by being more conscientious over what I buy, I can buy more expensive yarn But there's something to be said for finding a project that I really, really want to do and having the yarn on hand to be able to just start it. There are people, the other group of people, who like to have small stashes. They probably only need a basket for their current project and maybe some leftovers. That is definitely a benefit. They're not spending too much money on yarn on a regular basis because they're literally only buying what they need and what they can afford. However, if they buy online, they can't start their current project until the yarn arrives, which might take a bit of planning on their part. Or they can just make some smaller projects with their leftover yarn. So there's, neither camp is right. There's two different philosophies filling two different sets of needs, and neither one is wrong. Just also understanding why you do the one that you do, and recognizing if you're trending into something that's unhealthy. Like I was definitely doing some unhealthy yarn buying practices for a while. And occasionally I slip up and I wind up buying a ton of yarn I don't necessarily need. Even to this day, it is a bit of an addiction for me. So recognizing that, I've been able to instigate rules that help me. So just recognizing when you cross the bridge from something that you can afford to do, something that's actually part of a healthy hobby, and recognizing when it goes into something that's not healthy anymore. Anyway, I hope this helped you out. Feel free to show this to your significant other if your yarn stash is smaller than mine. Don't show it to your significant other if your yarn stash is larger than mine, because they'll totally point at it and say, you can do that too. Anyway, love you. Have a good day. I hope this helped. Bye.